Hi, everyone. My name is Ken Mockabee. I'm senior partner at Parux, and this is my partner, our CEO, Cesar Keller. And we're excited to be here today. We're going to be talking about how to plan and communicate future features and how to evolve your products in the right way.
Yeah, super excited. Let me tell you a little bit about Parix and a little bit about why we're here. Parix is a digital product studio. We help companies when off-the-shelf software is just not the right plan, or when they're trying to build a business model that includes technology, whether it be a SaaS-based web application, a two-sided marketplace, a mobile app, or just some kind of operational online technology that helps optimize their workflow. The three particular industries we love playing in is healthcare, fintech, and manufacturing. Although you know how it is, we just love it when we follow our mantra, which is cool projects with cool people. So we take some projects outside of those particular industries when we meet the right people. One thing that we're always talking about with our clients is risk mitigation, right?
Mhm.
And one topic that comes up is statistics and case studies on what it takes to put out a digital product. And what we know is digital products have a high failure rate for many, many reasons. In fact, some case studies have verified somewhere upwards of 95% of products can fail in the market. But here's the thing. Let's not worry about the 95%. There's 5% that do it right. And the more you lean into what top product teams are doing right, you can really use that as principles to risk mitigate. And that's what we're all about. We're trying to learn from the best of the best. We ourselves are trying to become the best of the best. So caring about all those things that a lot of people are not aware of can drastically change your percentages for success. So we're doing this webinar series, sharing a whole bunch of topics, whether they're pre-production, production, or post-production, to be able to share that knowledge, share that wisdom, and share practical insights. So with that said, I'll turn it over back to Ken, and he could tell us a little bit more about the topic today and kind of get us going. Super excited.
Yeah, I am too. So how software companies plan and communicate future features is actually a pretty complex endeavor, and it's more than just communication. It's also about how do you plan correctly, how do you add value to your products, and how do you not break them. And I think that's yeah, there's a whole bunch of things and complexities that have to be thought through, and it's got to be very strategic. And I think that there's a lot to be learned, especially, and it's really not just in the startup world. This crosses all products, big companies and small companies, alike share the same problems. Is how do you evolve your products gracefully, thoughtfully, strategically that brings more value to your customers? And that's a taller order. And I think that diving into that today, we can't cover everything. I mean, this could go on for we could talk about this for days and days. But I think we can touch on the high points and the things that we've identified that matter most. So, Cesar, you want to talk a little bit about some of the pain points that we've identified that software teams struggle with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll kind of give some key points so everyone can have the context, right? What we're talking about is launching a product. So when you launch the product, how are you communicating what's coming next in the future? Because at this point, you've launched some MVP or you've launched some major upgrade. But as we all know, these are living, breathing things that we build, right? Until you shut the server down, it's always supposed to evolve and get better. And in fact, we know the psychology of purchasing behavior when people get into SaaS-based software. They're not just buying based on current version. They're going to be lining up themselves with companies that truly push the boundary and are always making that product better because you're always paying for that subscription, right? So it is what we call a post-production location of where we're at in the life cycle of the product. However, just because you're supposed to plan things at that time does not mean that you're not trying to do things way before the launch. So that's the key context there. Well, the first pain point is what about companies that launch, Ken? And they absolutely provide zero information with what is coming next. That's a huge no-no, right? And that's a big pain point because I just shared the psychology of purchasing behavior for SaaS-based. A lot of the target audience and a lot of these people, they only care, they not just only care about the current product, they care about the future of the product. So not providing any communication is a bad mistake. If you do provide communication, you also have to make sure you fulfill those promises because if people say that you're promising something, but you're not doing anything about it, that is another issue, right? It's like, hey, hold on, I'm paying you, whatever, but no upgrades are ever coming out. What's going on? So I'm just saying it's a delicate balance
Mhm.
that you have to commit to what you're actually going to do. So that's kind of the first point. The second one is it's a little bit beyond the announcement of features, like we were talking about. It's features are great, but what's the value of that feature? It can't just be like feature, 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 feature just for the sake of features, and you're just slapping a whole bunch of functionality together that nobody's ever going to use, right? There's a difference when you actually put out a feature that matters. Well, in order to put a feature out that matters, there's a lot that comes with that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And we call it triage, and we call that understanding and falling in love with the problem and making sure that you have feedback loops with your users. If you don't
Mhm.
have that, you're never going to be able to distinguish the value of different features. And then the last thing is, although communication is key, the strategic decisions between what features are coming out first, which ones are coming out second, and what's the cadence and pace of those features that are coming out, that's key as well. It's just not as easy as people tend to think. So those are a little bit of context of pain points that we're trying to share so that you can take that into consideration whenever you're planning strategic communications about your product and specifically the roadmap that's coming next.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Cesar. I think one of the things that we've talked about a lot is, feature bloat, and that's one of the struggles that a lot of software teams have is that they're selling features very often instead of usability, and they're not listening to the users. They're launching feature after feature after feature because there's almost like an arms race. You've got, and I think the CRM industry is one of those industries that suffered from that. I like to pick on them a little bit because I've followed this over the years. And CRM industry is really high failure rates, like 80% are probably total or partial failures, and that's really, really high. The problem is that they don't really listen to their customers. I think they're launching feature after feature in order to, like I said, that competitive arms race that they're trying to engage in, and they're making their products unusable and bloated and just really difficult to navigate. And I've tried. I've had my share of CRM experiences that were just brutal. One of my favorite brands in the space, though, is actually a local St. Louis company here called Less Annoying CRM, and their brand says it all. They have capitalized on the idea that CRM needs to be simpler, not simplistic, but simpler, easier to use, have the vital features that you need, and but not have stuff that gets in the way of actually using the product and making it cumbersome and slow and hard to navigate. And I've been really impressed with that brand over the years, and I've followed them a great deal.
One thing I like to highlight and kind of kid around with you is what are features meant for? Features are meant for customers. If you don't have any customers, you probably have the wrong features. Because ultimately, all we're trying to do is add value through the use of your tool, right? But I think that the insight is a little bit deeper than that. The insight is if you don't know your customer well enough, you're never going to develop the features that matter the most. So you have to fall in love with the problem. A lot of times, I know that you and I, when we talk to prospects, a lot of prospects come to us and say, we want to build a tool similar to, and they point to the competition.
Mhm.
And then when they ask us, hey, we need these features, they immediately are just repeating back the features that this other product has. And sometimes I feel like, have you done enough investigation? Have you done enough research? Have you reached out to these potential customers? Do you yourself know, are you an SME in the space to know how to take out the features that don't matter?
Yeah.
And that is so much easier said than done, right? Because if you have no customers, you can have all the features in the world, but is it because of bloat or is it because you don't understand the problem? Is it because you're trying to copy someone in the market? These are the things, again, you have to challenge that status quo. And this is not easy stuff, right? You really got to know what matters and you really got to make sure that you have open communication with your target customers in order to make these tough decisions. So looking forward to kind of diving deeper into some of the stuff that we're going to share today.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that, excuse me, product teams are driven by marketing decisions and sales decisions more so than users. And I think that's the point you're making, is that, if you're not listening to your users, if you're not giving them what they need, then you risk having your product go off track. So let's dive into a little bit about the cycle of feature development and that entire release cycle from beginning to end real quick.
Do you mind if I just share two quick stories, Ken, before we dive into that
Absolutely.
cycle? I just wanted to give kind of some examples and insights of two different companies that I've had experiences with, specifically with the announcements and roadmap and whatnot. Number one, I remember being a part of the Adobe Business Catalyst community. And one thing that I noted that they did really well is they would have town hall meetings. That's kind of the label that they had, type of a thing. But for all the Business Catalyst members that were leveraging that software, there would be a cadence of when you can meet, when you can ask questions, when you could see what's going on with the software that was being developed, what was coming down the pike, what decisions they were making on maybe we're not going to have this feature anymore. But the thing is, they provided a forum for us to like show up and participate and be active in the space. And then they provided other avenues to get feedback. Is how is this going to impact you? And what do you think about this? And let's make some decisions. So Adobe was doing a couple of things that were really well. Number one is they had a strategic way to involve their customers. They had a town hall to be able to say, hey, besides what we're posting on our website and our forums and whatnot, here's a live engagement event and a ritual that we're having on X cadence to always give you the opportunity to have number one, an understanding of what's going on, but then a shared voice to give us some feedback. And I just thought, well, that's an excellent example of companies that are doing things right. The other example is Basecamp. I've been using Basecamp for many, many years, to a certain degree, just like a hub of communications, because it's so simple, right? They do a great job, and they've evolved over time, but they do a great job of communicating. Here's where the product's going. If you go to their website, they have really good content on here's the features that we're releasing. Here's feedback that we've received from our users. We feel that this is going to give value. Here's the order in which we're going to, throw this out. Obviously, they have, a really great ecosystem between an actual mobile app and a web application experience. So they have to make sure that both of those things and both of those upgrades and releases happen and they're synchronized. So check out Basecamp. They do a really good job of posting information and that feature roadmap on the website. Those are examples of companies doing it the right way. So I just wanted to share those insights before we get into the information you had mentioned. But to piggyback on what you're saying, there's a process behind the process. There's almost like a cycle of how to think about features. So just to give you guys an extra set of context, we wanted to share what that is, right? So from my perspective it starts with the feature being requested to some degree, whether it's internal from the product team, internal from stakeholders, or whether it be you're talking to customers and they're requesting said functionality. So that's kind of where it starts. Then it shouldn't be, we're just going to do it. Then you have to validate that particular request. Okay, let's take a look at what that is, what that means, and why it provides value, and go back to your anchors and go, how is this going to add value to the product overall? Is it going to affect everybody? Is it going to affect some people? And let's start determining that value, okay? So a little bit more strategic. Then you have to plan that feature. Where do we plan this new request amongst all the other things that were either in progress or coming soon or mid-flight, right? Then you have to have the communications created. Like, you got to confirm, yes, this is something that we're going to do. So you got to start communication plans early, not later, because you got to go, okay, how long would it take to build this feature? When are we going to release this feature? How does that feature play well or along with other features around it? Then you have to actually build the feature, and you got to test it, and you got to go through iterations or whatever that is. Have you planned enough buffer to make sure that that feature is correct before it hits the, a release? And then you got to have customer support ready, because when you have a brand new feature, people got to learn how to use that feature, and you got to make sure that you're ready to announce to the world, this is how you use this particular feature set. Then now that the feature is released, you got to educate the market on here's the value, here's whatever, here's why. Now, I say that all about that cycle just to demonstrate the maturity that you have to have instead of just winging it. And not only that, every feature that you add into that cycle is an opportunity cost for another feature not being paid attention to. Because the more features that you have, one of the things that we talk internally is you have to maintain all features. So at some point, do some features have to go for new features to come in? And that's kind of what you were talking about, the bloat. If you continue just adding features, but they don't add value, you start making this ecosystem way more expensive, way more time consuming, and more complex to manage over time. So you really have to really think about, is this taking over on something else, or is this just one more thing we're adding to the mix? And
Yeah.
those are just some critical decisions. So I just wanted to make sure that we explain that it's not as easy as, yeah, we're just going to add another feature, add another feature, add another feature, and we're just adding, we're a feature factory, right? Because if you do that, at some point, your tool will be bloated. At some point, you're not going to be delivering value if you're just adding features for the sake of features. So we wanted to set that context early on before we dove into the other more meat and potatoes of the conversation.
Yeah, well, I've actually got one more story that I wanted to share along those lines. We've got a media company that we worked with a number of years ago, and we started working with them, and their site was an absolute nightmare. It had so many functions and features, and it was data-driven stuff, and it was plugins and just enormous numbers of things that it did. And so we started working with them, and I said, look, you're kind of at risk here of getting security. You've got some security holes here. And sure enough, they did get hacked in the middle of it. So we had to take their site down, and we put up a very quick site to get them back up and going within just a day. And they were kind of freaking out because they were losing all of those things. And we started saying, okay, now that your site's down, start tracking who is complaining about those features going away. And after about a month, they came back and said, we've had like nobody complain. And we did have a core number of things that we were working on that we knew were used all the time. So that was just an example of someone who, a team that had developed all these things and thought that they had value. And in reality, they had very little value and just were creating enormous, maintenance and support and development costs and risk. So, just the assumption that those features exist, they must be maintained is really false. And I think product teams have got to take the time to say, okay, what is really being used, what has value, and what can be, eliminated and deleted.
No, that's actually a great transition into one of our first points, right? You said it eloquently, and that's listen to your customers continuously. Just because you've launched doesn't mean you stop listening to customers, or just because you're in the build phase, you stop listening. You're always listening. And that's an example of, well, at that time, they were paying attention to what's going on, but you should create mechanisms on, just like I was saying with Adobe, how can you always be talking to your customers and listen to them, because they're the first set, or that line, that front line that's going to tell you, this was what's valuable to us. Please listen to us. Now, you can't do it like as individuals, right? It's got to be an aggregate, and you can't just listen to one little bird chirping, right? But what are you doing to foster that relationship? Companies that care to build, here's the time, here's the place, here's the cadence, here's how we listen, here's the process behind the scenes, and we're getting multiple people on our team listening. That's how you do it. So there's strategy to it. There's time that you have to focus on making that happen. That's what top 5 teams do. Other teams just go, oh, we'll do that later. We don't have time to do that. We're too busy with building the product and getting things out. Hey, that's a sign of distress, and that's a sign that you are not mature enough to be handling the load. So I don't know, anything else that you wanted to add? It's just learning how to create the forum, I think, is the big takeaway for this piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of software companies think that they've got a support, email address, and they can just, if somebody's got a problem or a question, they can just drop it in there. And I think that's nothing wrong with that. You do need that, but you've got to go deeper than that. You've got to create those mechanisms that allow your customers to give you active feedback, actively solicit that feedback from them, and give them ways to communicate that to you. This might be a little bit more structured. So if you're considering something that you've had a lot of requests on, that's a great time to put that out to your users. Say, hey, we're looking for specific information and specific feedback about this potential feature or the feature that we've launched that needs to be improved. And I think that kind of active solicitation and giving them links and mechanisms to communicate and have that dialogue with the team is really, really important. And then you have to also have that ability to, follow up with them. If someone has a key insight, one of the things that we always looked for was, is someone going to give you an insight that something that you never thought of, that your team never thought of, that never came over your support ticketing system, and somebody makes an observation or has a question or a suggestion that's really, really powerful. That's something that you can take a look at and say, okay, that could really, evolve our product in the right way. So those are the kinds of things that good product teams do. And it's not just a one-way street, it's an active dialogue.
I think a little extra insight for everyone is you're talking about the benefits of product management and how you're managing the product moving forward. But if you can tout that you have an active community, a forum to share voice and to provide feedback, that's positive for marketing and sales. Because remember early on when we were talking about if you can prove that you're doing this the right way, customers are looking for that. If they have 3 or 4 options for the product type that you're delivering, and you are the one that's actively saying, we have an active community, we talk to our users, we listen to our users, we engage with you, and there's another company with a similar product that's not even saying anything about that, there's no roadmap, no nothing, that makes a big difference for onboarding and getting additional users inside of your product. So it's not just the product management. This can help with the sales and the marketing as well. Well, the next conversation that we're going to have centered around request management, and that is requesting features and how to intake all that stuff. You did a little bit of research on that, and this is something that we wanted to share. So can you highlight some of those things with our audience?
Absolutely. So we already talked about how you actively solicit requests, but I think one of the things that software teams have got to do is they've got to be monitoring and looking for activity on social channels. There's so many channels now. You've got Reddit, you've got Facebook, you've got active forums all over the place, and I think that having a way to monitor those is a way to intake those feature requests and those problems and getting back to people. So having a centralized database of those feature requests, not just the ones that come in from your system, but also the ones that come in from maybe your salespeople to say, hey, I got this really interesting insight from one of our potential customers, and they need this kind of thing. And to be able to track that and put that into a database that allows you to manage those properly is really, really important. And there's a lot of good systems out there that are free, that do feature request management very well and allow you to apply, different metrics and scoring and give you some insights before you actually, build a feature.
Half the time, the battle is timing. Oh, that's a pretty good idea. But we have a backlog filled with hundreds of good ideas. How do you convert those ideas to valuable features that are going to resonate with your audience? But you're right, the maturity of how you capture, the process of documenting and making sure that those ideas don't fall through the cracks. That's what we're talking about here. And not that you can't manage that without tools of the trade type of a thing, but the companies that are very mature about this are the ones that succeed because they keep those ideas and they are smart about the timing of when they're going to look at those. And that's called triage, right? That's called triage and going through this product management process that we all talk about. But if you're all over the place and you're not organized enough to document and keep that in a place where you can continuously review it, you're going to be struggling for sure. The next thing is once you have all of those particular ideas in a backlog, how do you score them? How do you triage them? So another piece of information that you shared and you talked about a little bit on your blog is feature request scoring. Can you just give us a little bit of blip on that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of methodologies out there. One that I really like a lot is the RICE scoring method, because that is something that it's very clear. RICE means reach, impact, confidence, and effort. So the reach is how many customers, how many users will this feature actually reach? How many of them actually have requested it? If it's just a couple of really noisy people and you're responding to that noise, it may not have the value and the impact that you want to have. And that's the second piece, the impact. How does it impact your entire product? Is it something that's going to add value and make it more usable and more desirable? Or is it something that's going to get in the way and just it's a distraction? And then confidence. Are you confident that you can do it? It's not just a matter of technical confidence. It's also resources. Sometimes we see software teams, especially smaller startups, that overreach and they don't really have the capacity to do all of the things that they want to do. So being able to keep reins on that team and not go outside those lines a little bit is the guardrails is something important. And if you do go outside, you can wind up getting out over your skis, as they say, and you can wind up getting bogged down, and then you get pressure to launch something that's maybe not complete. You run out of resources. So you've got to make sure that it's balanced within your team and with the resources that you have. And then the effort that it takes. I think that's one of the things that we see very often with product teams. Like, okay, part of the scoring model is that there may be a handful of things that you can do very quickly, very low effort, that can advance the product that you get a lot of requests on. It might be really simple stuff. Look for those things, and those are opportunities that you can take advantage of to make your product a lot better. So those are some of the things that we talk about a lot. And you mentioned Basecamp, and one of my favorite blogs that I ran across not too long ago was really kind of an old blog from 37 Signals. One of the developers, he made the point, every time you add something, you take something away. Something changes. You've taken away maybe a little bit of clarity, maybe familiarity, manageability, agility. Those kinds of things change. Your user experience changes a little bit. Those aren't necessarily bad things. Sometimes there are improvements, but you just have to be cognizant that everything that you add has an impact overall on the product, and just have to be mindful of that.
You have to understand what the trade-off is, I think, is the key
Exactly.
insight there. I really like how you presented one of the simpler models, right? The RICE model. We don't care what model you choose. As a chief product officer, one of the things that I look at is it's a portfolio. So when you're talking about how to move a product forward, you don't want to just do the lowest hanging fruit. You don't want to just do the complex, and you don't want to do things that are in between. It's how do you move this portfolio evenly? Because you can easily say, okay, the reach, the impact, and the confidence, these are all scored the same for feature A versus feature B. Feature A, little effort. Feature B, ton of effort. That doesn't mean that you're not going to do feature B. And that's why I call it a portfolio, right? You
Mhm.
have a whole bunch of features that you're evaluating, and you're going to get all these scores. But if you have the maturity to have a model that you consistently score, now you can make decisions in the aggregate. You can say, okay, every quarter, the goal is to maybe do one complicated feature, three simple, easy ones, and one in between. And, that's the strategy for that particular quarter. Now, does that mean that that's what you do all the time? No, there's going to be some things that trump certain things based on value and listening to your audience. But the fact that you have process around it and that you can leverage a model to be consistent, that's a key insight right there.
That's
Um,
exactly.
Lastly, we always talk about prototyping and iteration. And just because you launch does not mean that you stop. So obviously, prototyping features is a subset of prototyping, maybe an overall segment, module, or an entire application. But you brought up a great point, right? Just because you've launched doesn't mean that you stop that. the top 5% of teams that are successful, they never stop prototyping. They always continue iteration and they always continue feedback, from the collection of the idea to the value of the idea, the processing of how this impacts the product, to prototyping that and then releasing it. That iteration cycle never goes away. So you have to make sure you keep up with that. And again, it's one of those, you have so many things to do. That's why you have to be careful as to what you choose to do, because there's always opportunity costs. So I think that was a really good call out in your notes. So I don't know, I'd kick it back to you for a little summary. Why don't you give us a little summary? Here are the actual things that top 5% teams do when it comes to features and roadmaps and educating their customers on the value of what they're doing next.
Absolutely. So the thing that we've hammered throughout this entire webinar is dialogue. It's communication and dialogue. It's not a one-way street. You're not just telling your customers what you're doing. You're soliciting feedback from them, and you're doing that on an ongoing basis in a structured way, in a strategic way. And again, never stop prototyping. You're always trying to test, and is what you're building, does it have value? Are they going to use it the way you wanted them to? Just because you got a feature request doesn't mean that you did it the right way. And the other thing is, don't break things that work. We see that all the time. Product teams will have something that really is it's a great feature that people use and love, and they want to improve on it. In the process of improving it, they break it. But if you're prototyping and you're iterating, you avoid those kinds of things because you're going to get feedback and you're going to catch those things before you launch. So I think that's pretty. Anything else that you want to add, Cesar?
Yeah, I was just going to say the strategy here is just because you're adding a feature doesn't mean you're adding value. Maybe that feature has value, but introducing that feature set into a larger feature set can cause issues. So as long as you just have critical thinking of how this feature affects the tool, how it affects the audience, and how it either adds value or limits value or takes away, you just need a good process for that. So I think we talked about various ways to do that, various ways to handle it. So hopefully all these insights help our audience.
Well, Cesar, this has been fun. Thank you very much for your insights, and looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ken. Until the next time.
Bye-bye.